Namaste, I'm Umang and I welcome you all to Bharatasya Sangeet Vishwanubandh Yatra. It is an attempt to trace the journey of Indian classical instruments and Indian classical music in interrelationship with world music. This yatra is brought to you by the Ministry of Culture, Government of India. I am from Mumbai Tarun Bharat and Policy Advocacy Research Center, and today we have with us Mr. Carsten Wicke. Carsten Wicke is a Rudra Veena maestro based in Kolkata. He is regarded today as one of the most outstanding Rudra Veena maestros whose music is carrying the almost lost sound of Rudra Veena from thousands of year old tradition into the present. Born in Germany, Carsten learned violin as a child. His journey into Indian music started in the 1990s. While studying under India's most popular percussion instrument with the internationally renowned tabla maestro Pandit Anindo Chatterjee. Being fascinated by the old classical Dhrupad music, Carsten meets India's legendary Rudra Veena master Ustad Asad Ali Khan, whose musical family tradition goes back over many generations, including outstanding beenkars, veena players like Sadiq Ali Khan, Musharraf Khan, and Rajab Ali Khan. Ustad Asad Ali Khan accepted him as one of his few veena disciples and taught him the traditional Rudra Veena in the Khandarbani style. While studying the vocal tradition of Dagarbani Dhrupad with Ashish Sankritayan, the current director and teacher of the Dhrupad Kendra in Bhopal, Mr. Carsten has completed musical versatility of his veena playing. Namaste, Carsten ji. I welcome you to Bharatasya Sangeet Vishwanubandh Yatra.
Namaskar, Umang. It's nice to be with you.
As I mentioned that you started your journey of Indian classical music in the 1990s. I want to know about your journey with the Rudra Veena. How did you become interested in this instrument and what drew you to Indian classical music?
Well, it's a question which encompasses, of course, quite a long journey, right from what you mentioned, me trying to learn. I have to say, I even didn't learn properly playing violin in the Western style as a child. It was the more desperate attempt of my mother to let me learn an instrument as a child, always with the intention saying, you know, you will enjoy when you are grown up. And to be very frank, the way of the classical music in the West, which is mainly a pre-composed music, without doing injustice, there's of course also space for improvisation, but mainly it's a pre-composed music. It never really struck really a string within myself. So I went there, I learned a little bit. But to be very frank, if Western classical music would be the only music available, I would have become everything but not a musician. So by whatever good fortune, in the beginning of my 20s, I came to India, and it was also initiated basically by listening more incidentally, you can say, to some Indian classical music, being drawn, fascinated by those, to me, quite new sounds. And then slowly, the journey took its own way. It's not happening in one day, of course. You know, I got in contact with the more meditative side of India. I think as a lot of foreign visitors will come. And coming from a side, let's say through meditation, where the teacher always explained about the power of Indian classical music as a very firm tool to calm the mind, to make you focus. And well, that's a intellectual approach, you can say, but then to really see the effect, to study it, to witness it on your own, that's a different thing. And over the years, from the meditation, I grew more and more interest to really practice this music, not only a little bit listen to it or on the surface, So I went to India after a few years again, after my first landing here. And by that time, I had fallen in love, really deeply in love with the tabla. I sing one of the percussion instruments which you can hear nowadays all over the world, you can say. And of course, Kolkata is one of the places, if you want to study the instrument, you can just go. Beside, of course, other ones. But I came to Kolkata. I had the good fortune to start to study with Pandit Anindya Chatterjee. And while being here, getting more and more engrossed in the scenario of the classical music, which was in the 1990s, I had listened to all kinds of Indian classical music. I mean, from semi-classical to the Dhrupad music. And I heard this very fascinating instrument, Rudra Veena, only on recordings. And when I was roaming around here in this highly cultural city full of music and ask and try to find a Rudra Veena and listen to a live concert, it was basically impossible. So I learned even in those days already that it was an instrument which more was a part of the museum than to be heard on the stage. Very sad kind of status. But then, yeah, what will I say? Where there is a fate, where there's some karma or whatever, where there's a wish in the heart, the things are happening. So I came to meet my future Guruji, Ustad Asad Ali Khan Sahab in Delhi, by good fortune. Whatever Khan Sahab saw in me, I can only imagine maybe the kind of, what will I say, perfectionist trait we got from the German DNA. So maybe he thought this guy might be able to take something up on the Veena. So I was allowed after some time to start learning with him. But to get permission of your Ustad is one thing. The other thing was a simple practical thing, like where to get an instrument. That was already a huge problem, even in the 1990s. Like there were hardly any Ustads left who played this queen and mother of Indian string instruments, the Rudra Veena. Those days, basically, we had Ustad Asad Ali Khan Sahab, and then there was Ustad Zia Muhyiddin Daga, who actually at that point of time already had passed away. So his son, Ustad Bahauddin Daga, had taken up the heritage. But that's it. There were a few very little more unknown players. Ustad Shamsuddin Faridi used to be there in Delhi. But it was really a rare incident to hear the Rudra Veena live. And as much, it was like there was nobody possibly left to take care of the manufacturing of the instruments because there was no market for it. There was a little shop here in Kolkata who closed its doors in 1996. And I'm just mentioning that here because my journey with the Rudra Veena was not only the journey of in the search of the music, trying to inhale this music, to learn the music, to study the music, to play the music. It was also, it became later a search for how to maintain this instrumental tradition in manufacturing the instrument. Simply because of that kind of lack of experts in this field. It's a big part of my life for the last, you can say, 10, 15 years. Right now, I'm running under a senior fellowship of the ICCR, which I was awarded in the last year, acknowledging this kind of research I'm doing for a long time now already. In what way can we enhance this production of the instrument? Because as rare it is today, still, we get a growing interest in the instrument by younger generations, and we still face the same problem. Okay, now you want to learn it, but where do we get an instrument? So this is a little bit background. Of course, the story is quite long. There have been many parts, and right from the 1990s, where I used to come on and off, means a few months I went for studies to India, then I had to go back to Europe. I knew at that point of time already, if you want to do justice to this tradition, to this kind of an instrument, you will have to live in India. So I really brought forward all my whatever creativity to make that happen. It took quite some time. It's something, nowadays teaching on my own, a lot of students will ask me, okay, how did you do it? Or how do you do it? How do you live with a dinosaur of instrument, which almost nobody want to hear and listen to? How do you manage your life, you know? And I always say this is not something you can answer as a general answer. It's a very individual carving out your way of how to do it. But definitely, if you fall deeply in love with something, if you're devoted to a subject, that's not true only for Rudra Veena, there will be a way. And that's also very, very much necessary if you follow up something ancient and rare like the Rudra Veena is today's tune.
Now, in this pursuit of Indian classical music from the 1990s till today in 2023, I would like to ask you, did the pursuit of Indian classical music change something within you?
Did it change something within you? Maybe you didn't feel that it didn't change much because every morning you have it. Where I'm pointing at is basically each and everything, whatever we interact with, it will have an effect upon us. So if something little like a tea or a coffee can have an effect, if something little like a virus can have an effect like turning our world upside down, I don't need to explain more, you know. How much can be the effect of a wonderful divine instrument like the Rudra Veena? Yes, it changes your life completely. It changes your life completely, and I'm tempted to say for good and for bad. For good, of course, in the sense of you're allowed, and it's a fantastic thing. I personally couldn't find anything better to dedicate my life towards, you know. I mean, in terms of music, in terms of what you can give to the world with this type of music. On the other hand, of course, one has to be also honest and true about that. It's not all roses, you know. The challenge to live with such a rare instrument, with such a rare tradition, which even most of the so-called Indian connoisseurs and classical music listeners haven't seen live or heard live. You know, most of the times, just on Friday, I went for the last concert here in Kolkata, and it's all the time the same. A few people, of course, had the chance to see it, but most of the people, it's like the first time. They saw it maybe in the museum, maybe on a picture. Nowadays, of course, on YouTube. But to have the chance to listen to the Rudra Veena live, that's very rare. And it's not only to have the chance. Then the next question is, do you have the guts? Do you have the attention span? Do you have the patience? Do you have the courtesy, I must say? And that is something I'm really struggling right now with, seeing so many different audiences from the West, where most of the people don't have any education about this tradition. And still I see people sitting there for hours, you can say. It's really often, you know, we don't even have a Pakavacha along because there are hardly any players in Europe. So for just practical reasons, often we have to perform a Veena solo. It's just Alap Jor Jala. Now here you imagine you come on stage and then 1 hour Alap Jor Jala, and then even no Pakavacha is rolling it. Oh my God. People will be all out by the end of the set, right? And there the people are sitting, one half, little break, second half, and then they will look at you like, why are you stopping? Why you just don't go on, you know? And I'm missing, to be very serious, I'm missing this type of audience. I find it slowly also coming up in India. So mainly young people. I had a great experience just a month ago in Auroville. Of course, Auroville, Pondicherry is an area where Indians and foreign people mix a lot, and devotees are naturally there because of the Aurobindo ashram and everything. So, but let it be what it is. We expected a small concert of maybe 50, 60 people in Auroville itself, very short-term setup, no big announcements and things, and we got a set of 250 people flocking in. I couldn't believe that. You know, it was a small gallery, so people sat in one level, then they sat in the next level. Some sat on the roof. I mean, apart from the sheer number of people, the attention, how the people sat there. Basically, like going into a course of meditation or whatever you want to call it. I was really intrigued. It happened to be also my birthday. After the concert, I really had to tell those people, "You really made my day. You made my evening." And why I'm sharing that, why I'm telling that, you asked basically, did it change something within you? Naturally, the music of the Rudra Veena is something which will attract and bring you also towards a side which is the silence within you. It is an instrument which I strongly believe, basically like most of the instrument of Indian classical music, their roots are in some or the other experience, a spiritual one, something which was experienced inside. I mean, you can go as far as seeing the point of what is called Anahat Naad. You're familiar with that concept of Ahat and Anahat Naad, right? So I really believe that this is it's a fact. It's not only a myth or mythology or something. Like we say Rudra Veena, Rudra, it was created by Lord Shiva. Okay, fine, that's mythology. But definitely there have been devotees, there have been Shiv Bhakts who were in contact with the sound, were with this instrument, who used that instrument as a means of meditation. We have images of the very ancestral types of this instrument being just a bamboo stick and a half gourd. And that is a statue maybe 1,500 years old. I forgot right now in which of the temples you can find it today still. So there's a Shivji standing and just having this half gourd on the chest, one string. And you can clearly understand this was an instrument not to be played as a performance, so you can do some entertaining thing. No, this was clearly there just for the introvert kind of getting in touch with the sound, getting in touch with the vibration. And that's the source of the instrument. It developed later into a musical instrument, which really came into something what we call Ragdadi music or classical music with the Western terms. It was an accompanying instrument in the medieval age for the vocal style, Dhrupad, and then later developed its own instrumental forms. All that is there. There's a grammar, there's an aesthetic, but it didn't change, for my understanding at least, the source of that. And that is, this instrument basically is like a bridge. It brings something from the subtle worlds into this material world, and it can transport you back. The greatest experience of listeners, which I really saw, is not that they say, "Wow, what a great technique! How fantastic you played Dabari," or what all these things are there. The greatest experience are listeners for me when they say, "I never experienced this in my whole life." People who went inside, who don't understand what is Rudra Veena or something, but things happened which they couldn't find before. This is the power of what I see in Rudra Veena. This is where it transports me every day again and again. And this is what it can do to listeners.
You've partially answered my next question, but I'll still quite ask you. I would like you to tell us more about the history and significance of Rudra Veena in Indian classical music.
Yeah, I mean, this naturally happens that those subjects will come together. I mean, as I just started to say, if you take the mythology, we have that name Rudra Veena compared to the Saraswati Veena, which is a very popular kind of lute instrument in the south. Mythology says that Shivji was sitting on Mount Kailash and Parvatiji, his divine consort, was sleeping in his lap, and he was meditating on this eternal beauty. And he wanted to create something to signify, to put it into some shape. And then this is how my Guruji used to tell the story. He came up with the shape of the Rudra Veena. And the story goes even on when Parvatiji saw this beautiful sound of this instrument. She also wanted to have one, as it is. You know, when he has one, she also wants to have one. So she created another type of instrument that is said to be the Saraswati Veena, which she gave later to Saraswati. So now, if you take the mythology, as I just started to mention before, it gives us at least always a hint into the history. So I'm very much convinced it was, of course, the circle of kind of rishis, munis, those people who really were rather in seclusion, who listened to this kind of subtle sounds, this anahat naat, whatever you want to call it, who had this yogic practice and who wanted to create something which would enable normal people who yet haven't developed the ability to perceive this kind of sounds, to hear that also. And this is one side. The other side is they wanted to create a kind of a tool with which you could just start to focus the mind. And that is something, coming back to your previous question, did it change something within you? See, since 30 years, I'm trying to do meditation for regular hours a day. And I'm sure you will, in one or the other way, you will also do it. So, and then we know this effect. Now is your time. So like now is coffee time. Now is, I don't know, chat time. Now is this time. You try to sit down and do meditation. It can never work like that, because meditation is not an act. Meditation is a state of being. But still, we try to do it. It's a good thing. We try to do it. Now, I try to switch off my thoughts. It's hardly happening unless I'm sitting at least for half an hour. Then something starts to come down. The moment opposite to that, the moment I take the Rudra Veena and I start to play something, I cannot do that. I cannot linger around for half an hour and play with my thoughts and emotions in my mind and watching the whole game. And no, you are on. You are on, because the moment you're not focused and fully attentive to the instrument, the svara will just get visura. So in that way, it's an amazing tool to keep you straight forward, to focus your mind, you know, to train even this discipline. And it does it in a beautiful way, because it has a sweet sound. It's a bit like you have this story with the children who play with a knife. And then, you know, Big of Rukos is going and you are like, oh my God, they're going to hurt themselves. How to get it away from them? And they will not let loose until you give something more sweet and nicer to them, which catches their attention, right? So that's what we do here. With this kind of a sound, with this kind of a tool. This was one part. And then to go on, you asked about history and significance of Rudra Veena. See, those first instruments, without going too technically now, one was called Alapidi Veena. This is the type which I just mentioned. Then there came something called Ektantri Veena, which is quite in detail described in treatises in the scriptures, in the Shastras. Sangeet Ratnaka, written by Sarangadev in the 12th, 13th century. So he describes in details how the bridge is there and then how the string is going. It must have been quite a popular instrument. So the instrument, basically from being just a bamboo stick and one string, it got more strings. Then it got this tuning packs. You know, this is also quite an invention, that you stepless, you can change the pitch. And then you got those playing frets. Another great thing. You can make totally different music once you got those frets. And then we have another type called Kinari Veena, which in a way as a folk instrument even exists today in parts of India. And then we are coming towards around 14th century to what we call today the Rudra Veena. In its very simple form, having two tumbas, having the dan, and then having certain number of frets. Today it's 24. We call that achal tat, means you have all the svaras over several octaves. They are all there. You don't even need to change the pardas or anything. It's all there. And well, being first an accompanying instrument, it says, or it lets you know that what you played on the instrument definitely came from the vocal music. And then from there, it's said, you know, what we can trace in the history around 16th, 17th century, there must have been master musicians who were so versatile that they were allowed to do even solo performances, which in those days was something rather rare, as I understand. Vocal music was the number one, and instrumental music rather considered to be a sort of dry music, if you take it. It's very opposite to what we feel today, where the people all go with the speed and the technique of instrumental music and find that much more fascinating than that long breathing vocal where you have to be educated to enjoy it, you know. It's quite a turn. It has certainly also to do, and we come to the subject then, world music, the Indian classical music going to the West or spreading its wings all over the world. It's definitely for an outside audience much easier to enjoy instrumental music than the vocal forms. I think that also has played quite a role in the development we see in Indian classical music. To finish the thought about the Rudra Veena and its history, see around then maybe 18th, 19th century, this glorious days where the Rudra Veena, the Dhrupad, all these things used to be the kind of leading music forms and instruments that slowly changed into younger instruments as we see them today. Sitar, sarod, everybody knows them. In 20th century, even folk instruments like the santur, the bansuri came into the whole instrumentarium of Indian classical music. And the Rudra Veena stayed back. I would say, in the 20th century, it was almost already gone. When independence hit India, the whole social change happened. Those kind of court music, depending traditions like Dhrupad, like the Rudra Veena, they almost took a deadly hit. It was really by sheer luck and struggle of a few traditions that they maintained it. And that today, today I often joke about living with a Rudra Veena is like living with a pair of dinosaurs. It's completely out of the time. By whatever means, we could revive them because we have the means. But traveling with it, living amongst the people, playing this music, it feels very much out of time. For me, it is not something of that it would have no meaning or no reason to be there today. But you understand what I mean to say.
It's a unique experience within itself, yes. Now I'd like to know more about your study on the theory part of Indian classical music. As in, when you came to India, you were fascinated by Indian classical music and you decided to learn Indian classical music. You started off with percussion, tabla, and going on further to the stringed instrument veena. I would like to know, as a non-Indian, non-native Indian, how difficult or how easy was it for you to grasp the theory part of Indian classical music, and how did you navigate through it?
Well, I had the fortune of learning a little bit of instrumental music as a child. And even that was in Western style. One thing stayed really back. My mother used to say, you will be happy as an adult that you learned an instrument. And I couldn't understand as a child why. But one thing happens to you if you do music, whatever kind of music as a child, it wires something in the brain. And especially when you already played an instrument, somehow your fingers know how to create sound, whatever kind of sound that will be. Now, two of the things happened to me when I came beginning of my 20s to India, and I saw what we call Indian classical music. I heard that, I experienced that. The first thing somebody told me, when you want to learn an instrument, you have to learn some vocal, because everything is coming from vocal. And that was something I really enjoyed. It came very natural to me, because opposite to the typical upbringing in Germany, where people consider only a few people to be fit to sing or to be a musician, I like the idea that basically everybody has a voice. So everybody can express himself in this or that way. Very good, very bad is not the question, but you can sing, you can hum. So I did this as a child. And so when this came while experiencing or starting to learn Indian classical music, it was very natural for me that I said, yes, I also want to learn it this way. See, my start, Ustad Asad Ali Khan, when he started to point out, okay, if you want, maybe you can learn. He said very clearly, in our tradition, what we first do, you have to learn vocal. It's not that you become a vocalist, that you become a singer, but what you actually train is your hearing. Strangely enough, it's not even your voice, it's how you perceive and then how you formulate it with your very own instrument. That's a thing even I do with my students today. Very much to the misunderstanding of many people, One of my students told me after 2 years of teaching, he said, the first time when you asked me to start vocal classes before learning the Veena, I thought, why he's not asking me to dance around the apple tree? That would be as good. he didn't saw the connection between the whole thing. You know, now today is one of the most devoted students, and he sees it very clearly. But it took his time. To me, that was not at all strange, and so. So my concept continued. He said first vocal, then he said we train. Normally the people have to train their fingers on the sitar, a little bit easier, lighter instrument. And then if you have mastered those two stages, you might be considered to fit to start the Veena. I think this made really sense to go in those steps when you can start learning from a small, young age, and when you have the time to really make it a big part of your day. The way how I had to learn it coming already beginning of my 20s, being 20 years not in India, you know, picking it up from there. It was very clearly if you try to go this whole traditional way, you might touch the Veena. This is what another student told me. He said, you will have a white beard when you start to touch the Veena. So he said, there's only one way what you can do. Try to get an instrument. It's for the older student of Kansap. He said, try to get an instrument, put it down to Kansap's feet, and then ask him whether he's teaching you. So that's basically what I did. The instrument was not at all a very good one, but I went there to Kansap. I put down this very simple instrument I got there those days. And then he said, okay, fine, we can do, but you also have to do vocal. So that's how we started learning. And later I went even to a vocalist to continue my studies beyond that traditional Veena playing, because I understand so much how the impact of even another vocal tradition, and this was of the Dagas. I mean, everybody who is into Dhrupad knows the family tradition of the Dagavani of the Dagas. One of the families who really kept the Dhrupad alive, beside there are, of course, a few others, but this is one of the most popular names. And well, I saw the close interaction. It was a very natural thing. My Kansap and the Daga family, they always, over generations, they lived close together. So they had different musical traditions. At the same time, there was so much of exchange between them that it really came just natural in. And just a second point, which struck me so much and made me immediately familiar when I started learning Indian classical music, the fact that most of the music is not a pre-composed one. The fact that this music is basically a speech, a talk you deliver on the point when you do it. You create, you compose basically while you play. A concept mostly unknown in the West. As I said before, it's also there. Mainly we mention jazz traditions and people who improvise, but for a big part, it's not there. And that didn't make sense to me as a child when I learned Western classical music, that you would have to play only something what another person already expressed. Correct. What is this? I mean, I couldn't bring it into words, but basically it cuts the biggest part, the most joyful part of music, to express what is going on within yourself while you use the grammar and the language of a music, which of course you have to study for quite a long time in order to be able to do that. Absolutely. That's the other side, you know, it's not something you go for a course, 1 year here, 1 year there, and then you go and you play your ragas. Of course, not at all there.
That is true. Yeah. You've been playing the Veena for more than 26 years now, 27.
Something, whatever in this, 25, 26, I would have to count now.
I would like to ask you, what are some of the unique challenges and rewards of playing Rudra Veena compared to other instruments in Indian classical music?
You know, one of the jokes I'm doing when students physically come to my place here in Kolkata and express that wish to learn the Veena. I mean, I can't stand up right now, but behind me here, you will see some quite heavy dumbbells laying there. So one of the things is I'm asking them to go there and to lift them and to bring them to me. And it's a bit like that learning vocal. People will think, what the hell is he asking me to bring some heavy iron weights to him, you know? So that is one of the first challenges. We're lately joking about that, somebody wrote, oh, thank you for carrying on the tradition. And I said, yes, literally carrying on, because whenever I go traveling, you know, I have that 60 kgs of baggage with me. So this is one simply logistic kind of an issue you have to face if you want to go playing the Veena. The instrument, the box is all 35 kgs. Yes, you can have a little bit lighter, smaller instruments. You can save a few kgs. It doesn't change the fact that, we had at the beginning of the year, we had 2 Rudra Veena festivals. Never seen in my life within 1 or 2 weeks. One was in Goa and then one in Bangalore. So the organizers in Goa brought me straight from Kolkata down, and usually I have to take a train because nobody can pay those kind of extra cost of extra baggage and things. These people were so kind-hearted, they said, no, we pay your ticket. And I was very happy about it. Now, when it came to the part of booking the extra baggage, we saw Air India has changed its rules and regulations, whether by right or wrong. They suddenly charged it double and thrice. So that whole journey became for one way like 50,000 rupees. Can you imagine that? Just going from Kolkata to Goa. For 50,000, we used to go to Europe and back. I mean, I will not discuss the economics. I'm just pointing out what kind of issues you are having. And I'm really working also on, I mean, you have to, as a Veena player, as a Rudra Veena player, you have to think and to work on many issues to just keep that instrument alive. Logistic is one of the points. Acoustics is one of the points. And then if you come to the actual playing and practicing the instrument, I will not dare to say that it would be more difficult than any other instrument. No. You have to be precise, you have to be devoted, you have to do your hours of riyas, and you have to find your voice in any other melody instrument as well. It's not the question. One little thing is there, and that's maybe what some people point out saying, oh my God, you're playing the Rudra Veena. This is so difficult. One thing we have, for instance, all the modern types of instruments, which even took some structure of the Veena, Surbaha, sitar, all of them have taraf strings. Taraf strings, one thing, wow, a lot of tuning. So we spared that time of tuning. But what taraf strings actually do beside many things, of course, it gives this kind of an aura around the tone. When the tone is struck on the playing string, the resonance string, the taraf string will go and enhance it by vibrating along with it. But what it also does is it's a little bit clouding and shadowing the clear tone, which you're actually playing by that resonance. Now, for the ear, it sounds very pleasant if you have the taraf string. I remember I had a jugalbandi with a surbaha. So whenever the surbaha started playing, you were a little bit like, wow, what a genius tone. And when the Veena came back, it was like, wow, what a dry tone. Because suddenly that ringing, silvering ringing of the taraf were not there. But now what's the reason why we didn't add it to this instrument? And what's the advantage of it? You have that very naked, long-standing tone on the Rudra Veena. And as you know, in Dhrupad Ang, as we play, the main part is about the alap, and then of course Jor Jala. But the main part in the alap is about the whole way how you paint the mood of a rag. And that's not only in Dhrupad Ang by what kind of phrases are you playing, what kind of way, or let's say the centers or the swaras, which swaras are the tonal centers and things. It's mainly how you color the shrutis. And that you can see on the Rudra Veena like under a microscope. For good and for bad, I say again. Because if you're in tune, nothing more effective than that. If you're not, you're standing naked. You cannot hide it behind your taraf strings. That's one of the reasons where I really would say, yes, this thing is a bit more difficult in this term. It's also more effective in that term, but you have to be super, super precise. You have to be super. It's absolutely challenging fact. Now the opposite is again for the listeners as well. When I'm dwelling in this fine, subtle regions of coloring the tone, and that's my main tool, not using some kind of alankars, morki or whatever, krintan, samsama, all these things which I would use on the younger instruments, it's a challenge, but it's also a chance. It's a challenge because suddenly you don't have that entertaining jumping and playing around with ornaments. You have a very focusing kind of a thing. If you let it happen, it brings you definitely somewhere where you can't go with those other instruments. And that's a chance and that's a challenge. As I said, again, wonderful. To learn. Yeah.
Furthermore, I'd like to ask you, how do you see the role of technology in promotion and preservation of Indian classical music and instruments?
It's a huge, it has brought a huge change already to the whole Indian classical music. I would even dare to say, especially now my field for the Rudra Veena, for the Dhrupad. As I said before, after the independence, when all the people lost their engagement, their kind of places in the courts of the Maharajas, Nawabs, and whatever, for decades, you could say the traditions were almost dead. And it was not only, but it was also the rising interest in the West. Western audience took Dhrupad and the Rudra Veena, those kind of sounds, always as a very authentic form of Indian classical music. Whether that's really right or not, I will not judge, but it at least fulfilled their image of it, to be very meditative, to be very spiritual. So this support from the West, this interest from the West, this again brought a kind of interest again back in India. If you go today to Varanasi Dhrupad Mela, which runs now next year in the 50th edition, so for the last 5 decades they have been doing it, morning at around 4 o'clock, you count the numbers of Indians and you count the number of foreign nationalities. You will find, I don't know what the exact number is, but you will find more than the half, of course, being foreign nationalities. And this question of the technology, this really took a next step up when YouTube came into play. But I remember in the 1990s and even 2000 or somewhere, how difficult it was to have some special recording of the Rudra Veena. Of my concept in the beginning, when I started to learn with him, I had 2-3 recordings. There was whatever, a CD or a music tape, whatever from Music Today, this and that. And then everything else, it was somewhere, you know, these were some live recordings, which you were just exchanging like a piece of gold. And I made it also a part of my duties when I brought my concept 2 times to Europe in end of the 1990s and beginning of 2000, to not only drive him around and make that whole tour management and God knows what, I also started to record those concerts because they were so rare, there were so less recordings of it. And today you can find them, some of them, it's not all, there's a lot of material still waiting. I would have to find the time to edit and to do. But at least you find those recordings now on the YouTube channel. People can see it free of cost. And I would dare to say YouTube is by now the biggest library of Indian classical music, which you ever could find anywhere. You know, in earlier days, to give somebody, you know, a little glimpse of that, you had to, okay, here's a MP3, here's this. Today, I'm just clicking a few links and this and that. And there's so many of special recordings, which otherwise people would have hidden. They would never have found. It's out now there, which is again for good and bad, because people don't care. Now you have to beg them, please take a look. This is such a rare kind of rendition of this rag. Take that 1 hour and you know what they are going to do. They are starting to listen after half a minute, click, 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 click. Acha, when is the bandish coming? Okay, when the tabla comes in, blah, 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 you know?
Correct.
So
when people, you know, go and try to skip the alap and the whole process of starting of the song, yes.
They skip the alap in the live concert also, you know that.
Oh.
So when the alap is running, you know, they go out for a chai and a bidi, and then when the tabla is starting. That's what we used to do when I was still tabla player. So I'm just saying, you know, I understand that sign. I understand that I understand that mindset. I understand that mindset. I understand that limitation. See, that's not only for the technology and things. Our life is so speedy nowadays, and the possibilities also through the media.
Correct.
Now, Indian classical music has to stand against such a big market of so much of possibilities of sounds, of this and that. So the only answer, if you see that also with young musicians, young classical musicians now, they're too happy to play any fusion. They're too happy to go to a Sarigama show, to a competition. And what they do there, they will take the most kind of whatever rhythmical, I will not even call it gimmicky kind of parts, but those parts, of course, they are there in every part of music.
That is
but
correct.
It's reducing the music. It's reducing the music to this kind of excitement. And then you want to do something good for it. We want to show we also have that. Don't think we can't do fast. We can't do intricate and this and that. But if you reduce it to that, that's a point where the media becomes, of course, also a positive hindrance in a way.
Coming back to your performances, I would like to ask you, how do you approach improvisation and composition on Rudra Veena? And again, how does it differ from the other instruments?
Well, I'm sure you have heard at least one performance or something, if not live, at least on YouTube, and you compare it to, you must have experience in other performances. So in a very gross, broad manner, if you compare a performance of a sitar, sarod, or whatever, what we call the modern Hindustani classical music, and that of a Rudra Veena, of that Dhrupad arm, even the vocal Dhrupad would be similar. You will see that the part which we call alap, slow alap, medium alap, fast alap, or in instrumental music we call it alap, jor, and jalap. That will take, if we take, let's say today you perform 1 hour for one rag, we will take 45 minutes for this improvisation. And then we will take only 15 minutes for having the composed part, what we call the bandlish and vocal, or basically on instrument we used to call it gut. There is no guts actually for the Veena. That is an interesting part. I'm just coming back to that. But that is basically the division we do today. That's also the problem I'm facing when we discuss with organizers. Okay, why don't you present this mother and queen of string instruments just as one little point in your festival? We have these big festivals like Dover Lane Music Conference, it's so famous in Kolkata. There are other big ones, of course, but this is still the most historical. Out of 5 nights going on from evening till morning, you will always have one Dhrupad item. One Dhrupad item. It's a bit like alibi. Yes, we present that also. And then, if it is presented, possibly it's presented in the beginning of the whole thing when the people still running in. So the artist sits on stage and the people walking in like in a station, in and out, So these are also, what will I say? It's a huge challenge for the tradition itself. It's a challenge for the organizers. I understand that also. They all use now, you present only something which is exciting. It must be either a living legend. My God, how I hate this word. You can inflationate words by, now everybody who is half alive on stage is a living legend, or he has to be a sensation.
Correct.
Now, what does it do to Indian classical music? I understand marketing. Yes, we have to do marketing today to reach out to anybody. That's fine. But what is more important, the music or the marketing? By now, if you see the reality, marketing has won. Right? So
the performances that you've performed into the festivals that you've been through, can you share any memorable experiences or performances that have particularly influenced your musical journey?
Definitely, I just shared with you. That was at just a month ago or 1.5 months ago in Ottawa. That was the first time that I saw this number of, first of all, young people. Normally, our classical audience in India is like 50 plus. And when you ask them to sit in the classical Baitaki style on the floor, you already know, oh my God, the old bones are going to crack, So please make sure you have enough chairs for all the elderly people who can't sit anymore on the floor. And so these are like 2 important points for me now today. Yes, all of us, like I said before, marketing and big festivals and things, these are kind of marks in your performance where you work for. And I had a few bigger festivals where I was allowed to perform, let's say like that, because still one has to be very honest about it. Being a non-Indian nationality and then playing such a rare instrument, this is still a quite rare thing happening in India. And on one side, this gives you a kind of a curiosity. On the other side, it's still the question, can that person really do justice to the subject? The question, interestingly, comes not so much from an Indian side than it comes from the foreign sides. We had it last year. We were about discussing about a festival to perform somewhere in Europe. I will not even say the country. And then after giving all the material to the organizers, and we got the message back, yes, we got the funding, we do the festival, but we can't invite you because we think the audience will have a problem, you being a white guy playing Indian classical music. They will have the feeling that can't be right. So there's no question, you have given half of your life or more than that to this music. You are one of the very few players today. That question doesn't come up in their mind. It's just a kind of cultural bias. So Indian classical music only can be done by Indians. I'm a little bit striving away from the actual question you gave me, but this is part of the whole game we are facing today also. I don't think it will take too long because the numbers of players we have, the music, the way how it spreads all over the world, it becomes much more, it will in 20, 30 years, it will be much more normal kind of a thing that you come from outside of India. As I just take 2 days back to somebody, I forgot what was the context, but I said, can I tell you a little silly secret? It was a neighbor here in my living complex who came up and then she was like, oh, what are you doing? Oh, you play Rudra Veena, blah, 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 blah. And I said, so let me share you a little silly secret because then the question was all, oh, you come from Germany, respectfully from Germany. I said, I had to be born in this lifetime outside of India in order to do justice to this subject. Whether you find it silly or not, I tell it to you also, you cannot come just by incident from somewhere from a different culture and then become a Rudra Veena player. It's not happening without a background. The question for me was for a long time, why did I have to be born and brought up for 20 years in a different culture? By today, it is very clear to me, possibly my parents would have done what they do to every Indian child, or doctor, lawyer, engineer. Please go out to US, to UK. That is a life which you have to attain. Rudra Veena? What you are talking about? That's nothing, you can do, spend your life with. So coming from outside made it much easier for me. It also was a big challenge. So the question was actually about memorable performances. See, when I perform in India, of course, you are happy to perform this instrument in the mother country of this music. It's always a beautiful thing to sit on stage and then you open up and you explain to the people about their very old culture. It's a bit of teasing, a bit of fun. But it's of course also a bit of being serious and people come after the concert and they say thank you for maintaining that. I understand, but also I understand, for me to make it my center of life, it was possibly only because I came from the West. I have seen what you can reach there with all material achievements in a very short time. But if I would have been born and brought up here, possibly my mind would have been also hanging somewhere else. So this was finally an advantage. Even it cut me off for 20 years from that music and that culture, but it paid out on the longer run. So if I play in the West or on the opposite, up to the 1990s, I saw those 1990s because I was touring with my gurus at those days. We had built up in the West a quite community listening to Indian classical music. So at those days, internet was not yet there, YouTube was not born, and so all the Indian maestros used to come perform there, and it was really a big part of their routine to tour here, having the musical season in the winter season, having it in India. Then in the spring season, you go over to US, to Europe or whatever, have your concerts there, have a good earning there also. and then come back and so on. This ended basically by end of the 1990s. We used to have big concerts over there with, if not thousands of people, but at least 1,000 people, or sometimes even thousands of people. Today, 20 years later, Indian classical music in Europe is back, you can say, really to the rock bottom, in sense of there's hardly any professional organizer who will dare to make an Indian classical music concert. It doesn't matter what kind of superstar would come. The big old names are all gone, from Ravi Shankar ji to Ali Akbar Khan Saab, but even you would now bring Hari ji, or let's say anybody like Amjad Ali Khan Saab, or whatever.
Nobody will dare to organize something like a Woodstock festival today in 2023.
Oh, that's again a very different story. We're not talking of that. I'm talking of serious, professionally organized Indian classical music concerts in the West.
Okay.
So that's almost gone. But what we have now is we are back to this rock bottom, that people privately arrange this concert because out of love, not very professional. Money is hardly there. You hardly earn what you travel, and especially when you travel with the 60 kgs, it's really a question, why do I go there? But then you sit in front of whatever 40, 50 people, and you can see the dedication, how they listen. And that makes it all up in a way. That really makes it all up, because then you come to the core why that music actually used to be played. Not for professionalism, not for big festivals, not for being a superstar on whatever kind of media. It's just for these moments when something happens in people. And I still get those moments much more when I play in the West. I slowly get an audience in India also, where these things are happening. Normal classical concerts, unfortunately, in halls are mostly devoid of that effect. You play, you deliver a good show. I don't like, again, the word show. You play to your best. Equipment is all right, sound is good or is bad, but you miss that interaction with the people.
Yeah, that is coming to my next question. As a non-Indian musician, how do you navigate the cultural and the spiritual aspects of Indian classical music? And then what do you think is the role of cross-cultural exchange in this music? As when a Western audience is listening to an ancient instrument, Rudra Veena, there's some sort of exchange, some sort of knowledge sharing happening there. How do you look at that? You've been an instrument, or you've been a tool who's been doing that.
Well, again, partly this question has been answered, I think, before. Choosing already the Rudra Veena is quite of a daring choice. In all respect, how to travel with it, how to live it, how to play it, how to sell it, how to market it, all these are very questionable decisions. If you say, bluntly, I say often to people who approach me and say, we want to learn this, we want to put our life, I say you can't do any better professional suicide than to become a Rudra Veena player. And I mean it. I really mean it. Because you go against every reasonable, rational decision. But that's also, again, the chance in it. You go against everything which is already there. You try to dive to a point which we wish there would be more of that there. And where, if this sounds not too esoteric, I can predict we will have to have much more there. This world right now is running mainly on what? On markets, on economic-driven kind of decisions. Your value is decided either by the number of likes and clicks you could generate, again, marketing, and or by the numbers and figures of money you could generate by selling your product. And if I take this as a number of decision whether your music is great or not, this is a very questionable measuring incident. So deciding to play the Rudra Veena, deciding even to go on stage with that, because most of the people who learn that nowadays, when they start to learn, at least they're very clear about that they never approach a performing career. The market is not there. It's also the question, Why would you do that? Because when it calls you, mainly it calls you for the sound. It calls you, I mean, this is the first thing when I hear that from somebody who is approaching me, that he says, I know this is mainly for my kind of self-development. I need something to hold on. I need something which is tuning my life, something to look forward to live for. Then you are on the right, you're starting to be in the right track. Because that's what it mainly is. That's what it is now. Now again, performing in the West. Yeah, please.
That brings me to my next question as well,
Yeah.
which says, what do you see as the future of Rudra Veena and Indian classical music more broadly, both within India and in global context?
Difficult to predict. For Indian classical music, people will hate me for that. My prediction is it will get more cello, more surface based, rhythmical driven, more uniform. Everybody plays the same thing. Everybody copies from the next recording, because time for Guru Shishya Parampara is not more there. And everybody wants to sound like a good imitation of a last maestro. Just only they want to increase the speed by whatever so and so more beats per minute. That's what I generally see for normal Indian classical music today. I'm sorry for being a little bit radical about it. Of course, there are always human beings behind, and there are still, of course, musicians that are talented people who want to dive to the depths of the music, but then they have to also quarrel with the market. And the market tells them, be marketable, be sexy, be a living legend, be exciting, be sensational. All these kind of things which are a complete nonsense in terms of what this music was originally made for. This is touching again your last question. If you approach this music, it doesn't matter you come from outside or you come from inside. The core of this music is a spiritual one. And that is not fulfilled by sitting just in front of the audience and telling them we are going to play a very spiritual, meditative music. Afterwards, you go back and booze and drink and whatever kind of lifestyle you're leading. And, it's not done with this. If you want to live this, and I tell that to everybody who asks me, can I do this Rudra Veena? Can I go? I said, you will have to change your life. It will change your life. You maybe don't want to change it, but if you take this serious, it will change your life. It will lead you to a kind of outlook on the world, which will become more and more introvert. And with that, your extrovert actions will also change. They will become much more inclusive. You will see nature, you will see your neighbors, everything as a part of life. You cannot get around to see the music of life. And this is, I think, a bigger potential this music has than just being another world music. By the way, I don't believe at all that Indian classical music ever has become a world music. It's much too refined, much too subtle to become a world music. Let's say, like, you want to play some percussion, so you start to play some djembe, and you can just make some rhythm. Try to play the tabla. You will break your fingers for a few months to just get a da din din clear kind out of it. So that challenge is already something which prevents it from making it just a general another stream of world music, which you can use and misuse in your own liking. I like the specification of it to being too subtle and too refined, to just being another stream. Of course, you will hear now in many whatever film musics and stuff, even a few samples of tabla playing, a little riff of the sitar and this and that. But it hasn't become a world music. It will never become. I don't think so. Yes, there will be many cross-cultural kind of mixtures. This is simply what the market is asking for. That is what young musicians are going for. I think many of them enjoy it. Why not? The whole Hindustani classical music on its own is an amalgam of always new influences from the outside. It doesn't have brought this music to that point. It has brought it to what it is today. That's also a good thing. At the same time, I really hope that the music in itself can maintain its core. And that's, again, as I said, for me, it's a pass inside. It's a path inside towards your higher being. And that way it's still Marga music, music towards the higher
Sangeet,
self.
yes, that takes you
Yes.
towards the divine, definitely.
Yeah.
That is quite an eye-opening of an answer. But thank you so much, Mr. Carsten, for joining us and sharing your deep knowledge and your experience while playing an ancient Indian instrument for all these years. So, thank you, one and all. Guys, this was Mr. Carsten Wick. He's a Rudra Veena maestro, hails from Germany, lives in Calcutta. And you should definitely check out some of his performances on YouTube. This yatra
Yeah, you
is
can.
brought to you by the Ministry of Culture, Government of India.
Okay. Thank you, Umam. It was my pleasure, my honor to share with you. And as you rightly said, have a look on YouTube.